Let's move on to the next panel discussion, which will be about building the ultimate e-invoicing strategy for your business. I would like to introduce our panelists. First up, we have with us Amit Prabhu, who is the Chief Financial Officer at Puma India. He is a chartered accountant by education. He has over 15 years of experience in handling finance, logistics, regulatory, and compliance issues in the retail and consumer industry. Welcome, Amit. Next, we have Sachin Punyani, the Transformation Business Development, who's head of Transformation Business Development at AWS. Hi, Sachin. He's an alumnus of Pitts Pilani. He has around 13 years of experience in heading teams involved in delivery, data analytics, and cloud-based enterprise solutions. Prior to AWS, he has worked with firms like Ericsson and Samsung India. Welcome, Sachin. Our third panelist is Rohit Razdan, Chief Business Officer, ClearTax. Before joining the ClearTax team, Rohit has worked with firms like McKinsey and Company and ICICI. He is also a Wharton School alumnus, and obviously he's done his MBA degree there. Welcome, Rohit. How are you? All well, guys?
All good.
Right. It's a very important that we're talking about today. You know, e-invoicing requires a strategy for a business. And I want to start off with Amit. Amit, a large company, when it onboards something like a GST and e-invoicing, right? What are some of the challenges, or what are some of the IT requirements that one has to look at? Because I see a whole lot of unorganized businesses out there who are yet to get into e-invoicing. They may be doing 50 crore plus revenues. From a Puma India standpoint of view, right? As a CFO, what challenges did you see? Did you see an integration of IT and finance together? How did it go on for you?
Yeah. Hey, thanks, Vishal, and welcome, Rohit. Welcome, Sachin, and thanks for the time. So, good question, Vishal. So, in terms of how something like GST and how something like invoicing gets embedded into the whole finance as well as supply chain for a large enterprise. So, I think the first point is, I think a lot of these changes can be disruptive if you don't plan it well. And I think the rollout has to have adequate time frame, and you have to plan it in advance to ensure that on that certain date you have not only rolling out smoothly, but you tested and there are a lot of parts of the business that can get affected if it's not smooth enough. Now, one big challenge for large enterprises, especially in the multinational space, is you work on large ERPs which are not just implemented in India, but probably you're using a similar instance elsewhere. And changes that are done locally may impact some other part of the same business, okay, or it may impact some other geography depending on how the architecture works. So it's always a bit of a challenge to make changes, and if you're using legacy systems, then it can be a lot more challenging, trying to tweak certain things. And that's where I think you need to have a strategy around whether you're going to do it yourself, whether you're going to use a third-party application to build the e-invoicing part, and in how will you integrate that. So I think those are strategies that need to be put in place first.
The key word there is strategy. Rohit, you worked with a lot of businesses, and ClearTax works with some of the large businesses too. What are some of the strategies that you see? What do they blend an IT organization with the finance organization while implementing an e-invoicing strategy?
Yeah, thank you, Vishal, for having me, and a pleasure to talk about things that we are very passionate about. So I think what I think Amit was mentioning very rightly, that see, the key difference between GST and e-invoicing, that e-invoicing is real, right? Because it is a real-time system. The latency, everything from a latency to the reliability needs to be very, very high, right? And this is fundamentally sitting on top of systems which are being implemented in phases and so on and so forth. So so it has a potential to disrupt a lot if you are not very careful with the implementation. The other problem that I think Amit also pointed out too is that, especially for MNCs, right? And I would say it's not just MNCs, it's for any company with a reasonably large complexity. They have multiple systems, right? So we have companies which have done multiple acquisitions, and they have like everything from Tally to SAP HANA to like some custom ERP and so on and so forth. And to the government, it's one entity, right? So it's taking all of that various operational data, right? Massaging it in the right way, and then putting it into the government systems, right? And that's the only thing that the government systems care about, that I need these 20 things, you give me these 20 things, right? So it's a lot of, I would say, effort that is required. And what we are trying to do towards that is build a, see, theoretically it is possible, right? Theoretically, anybody can connect to the government system, themselves and do it. But in reality, what happens is if you take that call, you better be like, that be one of your core strengths. If it's not your core strengths, what happens as a result, Vishal, is like the escalations in GST versus escalations in e-invoicing are very different, right? You get escalation saying, my trucks are not working anymore, right? Because now e-way bill is tied to e-invoicing, and if your e-invoicing goes down, then billing goes out, right? And if sometimes what happens is, if the billing goes down, then the goods are not leaving the warehouse. If goods are not leaving the warehouse, the goods that are coming into the warehouse get stuck. So what you have to do is, whichever way, you have to have a very high reliability system, right? And then the other thing that you have to figure out is how do you take your existing system and put a layer on top, which is also intelligent. Because if you are just taking all your operational data, which by the way keeps changing, right? There's like all these complications around, credit notes, debit notes, and whatnot, and you keep dumping it in the government system. Government system holds latency only for 24 hours, right? After that, it is not retrievable. Whatever you have uploaded, it's gone. Or 24 or 48 hours, maybe they'll change or whatever. So you have to have, various levels of complexity, because it's a real time, right? So it impacts your business, and B, it has implications across multiple departments. So the three departments that we see working very closely, again, depends on the complexity of the business: finance, IT, and supply chain, right? Including the warehousing and so I think all these departments are required, and you need to create a system where all of them can talk.
I'm glad Sachin's part of this, because he's part of the transformation business development group, right, at AWS. It's very interesting. Business transformation goes well with GST transformation, right? So, Sachin, I wanted your views on IT requirements, because most of the unorganized businesses, to start e-invoicing, need to think of an IT strategy also. Amit, perhaps you can add to these views too, right? When this transformation happens, the other IT team come in saying things, the finance team also has to agree to it in a way. So your views on this, Sachin, what are the IT requirements that small businesses have to set up before they go forward in e-invoicing?
And I'll just start from the base, actually, that Rohit set up. See, the requirement of the high availability and the robustness of the system. Yes. Just one point adding on top of that is the spike and the volume that is being generated, because it's a real-time system. So many people sending the transactions. So the people who are very well organized, they know they have the ERPs of SAPs or Oracles or the other ERPs. But the people who are not organized or who are just starting and do not have ERPs, they should be part of that API economy. That means their systems, whatever they are developing, because the organized systems are already API driven, but the systems which are not API driven or not well organized, the API mechanism should be there. So one API we are talking about. Second is maybe some other integration, very standard mechanisms. Those must be in place. Rohit also highlighted that the systems do exist. The smooth sailing comes from the well integration part. So be it the financial systems, be it the IT systems, or be it the systems on the GSP side, they must well integrate together. And for the people who are coming out new, the API mechanism and the integration mechanisms are very, very critical.
Okay, interesting. Amit, would you look at transformation like that within Puma India? Is that how it started out for you? I mean, you have vast experience in this, so you tell me, how do you integrate the two?
Yeah, I think to add to what Rohit said, it's not just about having different applications, across through acquisitions. Even within an organization, there are different parts of it which probably use different technology. Take a case in point, the software that's used at the warehouse could be very different from the software that's used at a point of sale system in a retail environment. It's still part of the same company, right? And if you need to do some sort of a business-to-business transaction from a retail outlet, so that also needs to come within the e-invoicing scope. So some of these transformations are actually very, very difficult, because they are not envisaged in the first instance, and some of the software may not support such an integration directly. So to add to what Rohit said, the better strategy here would be not to tweak your existing system, but to use that data and use a system in between, software in between that can pull this data and send it to the government portal. Because
Okay.
the other portion that we see is, do we really have the bandwidth or the time to constantly change our system to, mirror what the government portals need? That's not a core job.
Okay, interesting. I like what Sachin said also. You need to have highly scalable businesses. But if businesses are watching this, by highly scalable, he means the cloud, right? Absolutely, because you don't have to set up anything physical in your centers. If you are thinking like that, it's a wrong strategy. The cloud is here to stay. So, Rohit, you would agree with the thought that one is, okay, you need to look at a highly scalable infrastructure, right? From there begins how you're going to roll it out across your value chain, right, Rohit?
Yeah, so I think, see, at this point of time, Vishal, what we realize is that in the market, there are certain, I think there are 2 or 3 sentiments prevailing, right? There's one sentiment which says that, okay, hey, these things are a pain,
Yeah,
the other thing is that, hey, I am used to a legacy system, an old school system in whichever they perform and so on, right? See, I think in India, whether we like it or not, right? I mean, we know how we were as a country 5 years, 10 years back, right? I mean, it was a very low, tax compliance and so on, right? It was very weak, right? Which is why we have swung, I think, to the other side a little bit now. So I think the sooner we accept that compliance is around us, and if you want to build a scalable business, right, without proper compliances in place, it's going to be hard. That's number one. And number two is technology is all around us now, right? And the old way of doing technology without cloud, right, is I mean, at this point of time, it almost feels like, like I was reading the report. I mean, even CIA is giving out like, kind of base they're using, right? So at this point of time, it's only our I would say old perceptions which keep us away from cutting edge cloud solutions. The third thing, as I think Amit was mentioning sometime back, right, is the nature of, see, the government itself is acting like a startup now, right? What I mean by that is their rollouts are very, very fast, right? And literally, like when they did the October rollout of invoicing, I remember like our team was online at like 11:45 p.m. For a 12 o'clock, they sent out the final notification. So the government is acting actually with very high agency and very high commitment and dedication in the COVID year, right? So now when things are changing so fast, if you do not have a cloud-based solution, right, I mean, then you better have a team which is like, then IT is like your deep core capability. Otherwise, you're just going to struggle, right? And I think thankfully, I mean, we have multiple kind of participants here. I think the ecosystem has now learned how to play, right? So for the things that we need, we use AWS, right? Because everybody needs high degree of assurance, high degree of latency, and so on and so forth, or low latency or whatnot. So I think it's just extremely critical that we think about it and we just accept that these realities are here to stay. The other thing I want to mention is that, see, it's much like, I think, the internal comparison that we make is UPI for consumers, invoicing for businesses, right? Effectively, it is as transformative, right? And India is the 50th country going live, or 52nd country, whatever, going live from invoicing standpoint. What we have seen in countries like Brazil, Turkey, and whatnot, right, is in a 5-7 year period, right, like somewhere between 80% to 100% of invoices are going to be digital, right? So I think, it's at some level, we can talk about the government and the pace at which they're implementing, and so on and so forth. But I think if you look at the broader thing, right, this is the tool which is forcing a lot of people to get digitized for the first time. And their lives actually, when you fast forward it 2-3 years out, will actually be very different. So there will be a set of people who will see that, hey, let me do this. And then 10 other things get solved for me, which otherwise I was not doing, or you can resist, right? So the choice is up to the customer, right? Like, you can do it in whichever way, but there are huge dividends, in our opinion, that will be realized for the people who actually accept it and try to see what else can be done with this.
Okay, great. Now I want to get into the diagnosis of this. Okay, I mean, we are not the panacea here, of course, but let's diagnose the challenges. We have Amit here who's from a business. We've got Rohit from ClearTax who can actually, and obviously Sachin from AWS, from more technology and understanding of the taxes point of view. ClearTax allows you to do that. Amit, what are the 4 or 5 challenges that SMBs or large businesses will face? Rohit, I want you to tell them how you can get rid of these challenges, right? Because the audience out here are these businesses that have not yet become compliant with GST. And Sachin, you could perhaps tell us, okay, knowing what the businesses are doing, this is what AWS can offer you to scale up, faster. Perhaps you could take your product to national or global markets faster, right? Something like that. Amit, over to you. Let's start with you. What are the 4 or 5 simple problems and how do you address them? And then we'll move to Rohit and Sachin.
Okay, so I mean, purely from a rollout point of view and compliance point of view, invoicing. I think first of all, and I'm talking about from SMB standpoint, if you're not on a digital platform, this is the time to get on point. So whether whatever be your current system, make sure that it integrates well with the entire GST ecosystem. Okay, so now that's a much bigger one where you're able to file your taxes also online, where you're able to export data online to get that one. One big challenge that currently that invoicing portal probably faces from time to time is the lag on the government side. I think for this yesterday, I saw some messages noting on one of the common groups that the server was not working. Okay, and this morning also I got some couple of alerts from that. So I think that is something that I think the government needs to address. That because the impact of that is huge. If you're not able to connect to the site, if you're not able to get the information back, you're not able to generate the QR code and IRM, you are actually stalling the entire movement out of the warehouse. Okay, or any other thing. And for time-bound services and goods which are dependent on this, where the invoice generation has to happen instantaneously, there I think this can be a big challenge to. So I think that's something that. And more importantly, I think you need to, from a pure supply chain point of view, I think it is about making sure that your processes are very, very tight. Okay. Historically, we have had certain concepts in India, where you sort of bill and you dispatch later, and some of that. I think those lags have to go. It's now about tightening your belt and making sure you are on the ball. I think that's the thing. So internally, I think you need to relook at the structures, what you've been doing historically, make sure you digitize, transform, and move on. So address these upfront.
Yeah, that's phenomenal. Rohit, I like the earlier point that you made that if you look at the 50 crore or 100 crore companies, 50% of them have already moved there, right? There's another 50% that's a laggard for many reasons, right? And like Amit mentioned, the realigning, the strategy part of it, sometimes also, these are founder-run companies. I think the founders should get aligned to this, right? They should say, this is how I'm going to transform myself. Rohit, over to you.
No, 100% agree, Vishal. In fact, again, right? I mean, there's no monolith out there, right? So we deal with companies of all sizes, right? That's how the ClearTax is designed, and we play without bias with any system, right? So we connect to people who have no system and they are working on our web product. We connect to people who work on Tally, whether old versions or new version, and we connect to people who are on HANA, right? Which is
as modern in memory,
right? Correct, right? So I think. So we get to see the same 50 crore company, right, in 2 different areas or run by 2 different founders, right, or owners, which act very, very differently, right? So we see 2 distinct behavior. There is one set of people who actually are telling us, who are pushing us and saying, hey, now that I am doing this, right, now that you have my invoice data online, which is even faster than my SAP data or my Tally data. Now, who all can see this data on their mobile phone? Right, because now I have real-time visibility into my system, right? So we literally have one customer who's pushing us in that direction, right? We have another customer who is telling us that, hey, it is interesting that now that you have both me and my distributors, right? Can you connect us? Because now you have this whole thing called invoice, which constantly bounces between me and my supplier, right? That, hey, this invoice is wrong or this PO is wrong or whatnot. What can you do on top of that, right? So I think it a little bit of it is because it's so early, right? There's a set of people who are looking ahead and saying this can be extremely transformative, right? And there is a set of people who are still resisting it, right? So fundamentally speaking, right, it is much like UPI in that sense, in the sense that the rails are there now, right? Now we are just an app, right? And our app will continue to enrich, but eventually it's about the customer on what they want to, how much further they want to push. The other problem I'll also tell you, Vishal, which we see as an emerging problem, especially as e-invoicing is going lower. As you may or may not be aware, initially it was supposed to come to all 100 crore below businesses, and then the government stopped it at 50 crores, right?
Correct.
At this point of time, whether in 2 months, 3 months, 6 months, whenever, it will go from 50 crores to 5 crores, right? At some point of time, it will go there.
That's the distribution drop so fast.
Correct, right? So then, so far, we've been handling roughly 50,000 companies in India in every wave, right? Next big wave will be 500,000 companies, right? So as I think Amit also mentioned, there are uptime issues and so on. There are certain issues which we are trying to address. Like we can only communicate, right, to the customer that, hey, there are government systems are down. We are doing the best that we can, but government systems are down. Please, relax and, sip your coffee or whatever, right? But government is also, that's why government is doing it in stages. And I actually applaud them that they didn't do it like they did GST when it was a big shock, right? So invoicing, despite all said and done, right, it has not caused meltdown in the, right? You don't see like dharnas on the street because of invoicing, right? As we did for GST. And the bigger problem that I see coming will be that, see, the government has already made it very clear, GSTN has, that if you don't generate e-invoicing, then your e-way bill cannot be generated. If you don't have your e-way bill, then your trucks cannot move. Now, what happens is a large company, which is themselves ready, but if their ecosystem is not ready, right, they are going to face problems because then they are dealing with non-compliant people, which is no fun.
Yeah.
Right. So I think that's where it is going now. Every ecosystem, right? And that's how government has actually designed it very, very well. The government is saying, hey, I got Puma online. Okay. Now Puma will force their own counterparts, whether it's on the supplier or on the distributor side, they will force them into becoming compliant as well. So in that sense, I think it's actually the design is beautiful, right? I mean, the implementation could be maybe a little bit better or whatever, but the design I see as, quite.
Okay. I'm glad you said that, because if GST was a person, right, there are no dharnas happening on the street. So that's a good test of character for the GST, that people haven't come out and protested. That's a great point of view from there. And Sachin, your point of view, right? Say all the businesses, say I'm a founder, I've got a 50 crore business. Okay, I go onto the cloud, AWS cloud, right? And, I start filing my invoices. You mentioned highly scalable. What are some of these challenges from a technology standpoint of view? Because I, as a founder, will think that because I'm in AWS, there won't be any problems or glitches, right? So how do I combine the best of the applications, like Rohit said, right? If I have a ClearTax also as a solution, right? How do I make sure that, I'm able to scale up as my transactions start coming in, as I increase my transactions from all my vendors?
So one point, as you said, like the scale up part, and second is like scale up without any loss of, keeping it highly available without any loss of downtime or without having loss of uptime, basically. So in AWS, we say that the SLAs and the guarantees that we say, they are extremely high. Plus, at the same time, the newer technology architectures, as we typically call them active. That means in the older conventional ways, people were creating the architectures where they said, okay, if my main architecture or main data center is running, and if it goes down, I should have a second one and then there are some lags to cover up before the second one comes up. In AWS, we say that we have an active architecture. That means both these systems run, multiple systems run together, serve the customers. And when, if there is a hiccup, because eventually it's a machine. If something goes down, both the machines, say, for example, are running, so they give backup to each other. So this brings up extremely high SLA. So this is one part. Second part, from the operational standpoint, when people say, like, if you're going to set up something, you need to meet certain compliances. So if you highest number of compliances that AWS comes up with, you need not worry about that. So if the business actually is, say supply chain business, they're exporting their own domain. Retail businesses are exporting on their own domain. So when it comes to the IT SLA management, IT uptime management, compliances management, this is an ongoing activity, and we call it as an undifferentiated activity. The people, rather than doing those undifferentiated works, they can focus on their own domain. So people who are in the supply chain, they can focus on their application, meet their customers' commitment, meet their customers' SLAs without worrying about the SLAs down. Another important point is like how fast you can manage the change. And these days, businesses are adopting the new ways like machine learning, artificial intelligence. So if you want to set it up at your own place, setting up the underlying IT infra plus the entire technical stack, it's quite complex. While when you come to the AWS, the broadest array of services, as we call, so from typical compute storage to the automation, change management, to machine learning, everything comes under at one place. So for you, if you want to innovate, if you want to adopt something, it's right available there. For you, you just need your domain knowledge, and undifferentiated work, as we say, is already done.
Okay. Do I need to employ a IT person if I'm implementing GST? Amit, this question to you: do you have to have a special IT person under the finance team just to allow you to integrate with the GST better? The reason I also ask this is because you may be in the best of the cloud. Right? Best of the cloud, best application. But then, like Rohit said, if the GST system is down, I mean, who's going to be penalized? Who takes cognizance of that fact, right? You guys will still be penalized for late filing.
Yeah, in this case, I mean, the e-invoicing bit, obviously the business takes a hit because you're not able to dispatch. Okay, and the penalties could be very stiff if you are invoicing without the IRN and the QR code on the invoice specific. So yes, I think there is that there are those challenges, but I think those challenges will be sorted. You know, I think every system takes some time to stabilize, and I mean, let's be honest, even the systems that we implement within our own companies, okay, they do not work like clockwork on the 21st instance. And that's true for every application across every company in the world. I think initial rollouts will have hiccups, which go through an upgradation cycle. So I think that's fairly well understood. And as business, I think we are willing to work with the government on these parameters where we understand that. But I think some of the other issues that I think Rohit pointed out, I think bringing the suppliers on board. Now that's a bit challenging that I find. And again, because different businesses are at different points in the digital adoption curve. Some may be, when you talk of turnover as a parameter to decide, there are industries where the turnovers could be extremely large with very small number of transactions. Okay, and how will do they really have those systems in place? So they may not be as large, they may not be able to afford. See, the margins across industries are not the same. Yeah. Right. So especially if you are in trading commodities or trading, so that some of it could be challenging in terms of adoption of this and the ability to roll it out. And to your real question, or do you need a full-time IT person? I don't think so. No, I don't think you really need a full-time. It's again about figuring out what is the right strategy to go back to what Rohit had said initially at the top of this call. He said there'll always be cowboys who try to do it their own way rather than use a system that's established in the market. They may have to have a fallback mechanism, but otherwise, I think what works now is working very fine.
Okay, great point. You know, Rohit, coming to you, some color from the varied number of businesses that you support, right? What type of solutions have you offered them? And what is the vision for ClearTax, and what is the way forward for your company in helping these businesses grow with GST and e-invoicing? And I know, Amit, you guys use ClearTax, so you can bring in your points too. Over to you, Rohit.
Yeah. So Vishal, I think the vision that we have actually starts at compliance and goes further, right? Because when you look at government's vision, right, government has actually come out, and if you read their kind of white papers that they have put out there, it's not actually compliance, right? They are actually compliance as one of the end goals, but really they're trying to just digitize everything, right? Which will over a longer period of time make everybody's life simpler and business easy in India, right? Now, see, just like, you know, UPI before it came and so on, right? Like a lot of skepticism on how will it work, very few people understanding. Now we know how easy it has made life, right? Now that is a consumer system, right? Therefore low complexity, right? This is a B2B system, right? So it'll take probably a year or two, right, for this to get settled in. Now, so therefore our vision, Vishal, is first part of the vision is just make the absolute damn best products, right? Which are required for compliance in India, right? So we want to make one pipe, right, that every business in India can use regardless of their size, right? Should they want to be compliant and should they want a cutting edge technology solution, right? If somebody does not want to be compliant, we can't help them. And if somebody wants to use a slightly outdated or old school solution, so be it, right? So our vision is first provide them a pipe that allows them to be compliant. The next thing is to make other business oriented tools, right, which help them in their day-to-day life, right? So for example, Amit would be dealing, I don't know, somewhere between like 500 and 2000 odd probably vendors, right,
Yeah,
on a
absolutely.
quarterly basis, right? Now we want to make tools which allow and see how ERPs are designed, Vishal, they are a vertical system, right? They run from manufacturing through supply chain to to the shop or whatnot, right? We want to create a horizontal system through which Amit and his vendors, right, can interact with each other, right? Acknowledge each other's POs, say where the payment has been made. These are things that right now happen, quote unquote, digitally over email, right? But extremely haphazard, right?
Yeah.
So, and there is this constant, any CFO or any finance guy that you see, right? They constantly are doing reconciliations between, did I raise a requisition against which there was a PO, against which there was an invoice, against which there was, a payment, so there's all this thing that they're doing. So we are trying to make the tools which simplify this, right? And so therefore, one is compliance. Second is allow businesses to connect with each other and resolve their issues on a common platform. And common platform cannot be SAP or Tally or whatever, because these are fundamentally different systems. Provide them one place where a small guy can look at an app and say, okay, I have sent this invoice. A big guy can look on, his SAP and say, okay, this is done, and allow them to just, focus on their business and not on reconciliations, which is, which we want to be our business.
No, that's a very nice answer. To simply put it, guys, your margins won't be affected by this because it's going to be as simple as that, right? It's just a horizontal. You can link in various systems. Your dashboards will be simple and easy to use. Rohit, correct me if I'm wrong. That's the future. Like Amit made a point, right? All the traders worry that their margins will be affected if they invest in these kind of systems. But no, I think your revenues will scale up faster because you're spending less time on documentation and reconciliation.
Yeah. So actually, I think, Vishal, it's about just the creative energies going towards where they should go, right?
Yeah.
I mean, at this point of time, you and I in our day-to-day life, right? Like we don't try to we don't grow our own vegetables, right? Like we focus on the things we are
Well
supposed
said.
to. We can all theoretically do all the things, right? Theoretically, right? But it is about Amit should be worried about, how do I, grow Puma into, the biggest, activewear, whatever brand in the country or whatever, right? So that should be his things, right? So I think, AWS has to figure out about their own things. How do we, create systems that companies like ClearTax and any other company can use, right? So I think it's about focusing on the key things which you are supposed to focus on, and then providing. And actually, these days, Vishal, I mean, see, India is a very price-sensitive market. So
Yeah,
therefore, any
extremely.
company that scales, right, whether it is AWS or Puma or ClearTax, right, they know how to give efficiencies and give things where customer is not beyond a point hurt, right, and customers will only pay, right, for things which are efficient, right? So actually, price is not the issue. Mindset, right, we see as a bigger issue. There will be laggards and there will be cutting edge guys, right? So that's my kind of.
No, that's a good, very good. Your arguments really sound, and I really enjoyed this point of view in terms of technology, right? The future. These traders, when they look at technology, they should not be scared, right? You remember when we were growing up, I don't know how old you guys are, but people said computers, all the LIC agents, for example, or the insurance agents would go and say, computers will take away our business. But actually, to be honest with you, all their businesses have grown, right? So that way, from a technology standpoint point of view, would you say that the future is about how you leverage intelligently? It's a part of your business strategy. Don't ignore it. Over to you, Sachin.
Yeah, I mean, completely agree to you actually. So instead of, people have started thinking, and in fact, the demands have increased. So if we just look at the e-invoicing case, so e-invoicing is the base solution that everybody is looking at. Now, the demand from the consumer side or the organization side is like, what is the top up? So how my reconciliation will happen automatically. Second is how my input tax credit will be maximized or will be rightly computed. So this is the now a demand from them, because they know that the underlying technology exists, but how to bring it to their benefit. So that is where this new technology, as we talk about, or new infrastructure or new machine learning, new AI, that comes to play. Or maybe the old school verifications of the input data that, I mean, the invoicing information is reaching at certain place, at central place, maybe at clear text. So they would be certainly expecting that it should be done automatically, and if something is wrong, be notified, all those things. So these small top-ups, people have started already thinking about. So they are not scared, but yes, demands have certainly increased.
Okay, my final question to you guys, starting with you, Sajid, what does the future look like in this entire e-invoicing GST regime? What is going to happen to India? We're talking about AI, we're talking about digital transformation, all this. What is going to happen with businesses?
Yes, the business is actually, I mean, I'll say these terms are now part of the business. So people actually do not worry about the underlying stack, as we say, what is the complexity. People, even the businesses now start thinking that, okay, I'm defining a process. What part of it will certainly be solved by the traditional systems and what part will be solved by the machine learning? Just taking an example, e-invoicing systems, we all know the transactions are coming up. The well-defined process systems do exist. But if there is any anomaly, do we have a formula? We don't have. But people know that yes, machine learning approaches do exist to solve that. The reconciliation right now, we know that there is a well-defined formula. But is there a way to maximize input tax credit, as I was saying? Or is there a way to find out that how my transactions have been happening? And is there any business insight, automatic machine learning based business insight for me? So these are now part of regular business decisions even before the project starts. So they are now integral part already, I'll say.
Okay. Okay. Amit, what does the future look like from a business standpoint of view?
Okay, let me just take a step back here. I think why you said you don't know how old we are in this panel, so I'm sure my co-panelists are much younger than I am. But when I was training to be a chartered accountant in the mid '90s, okay, Tally itself was a rare commodity. So very few.
Yeah, I remember.
Yeah, so very few of our clients had Tally. Licensing of Tally was a big challenge. Even if you had Tally, they would come and give you the printed books of accounts. So it was never a question of you auditing the system. It was like you auditing the printouts that came out of Tally. So this is the era of what I'm talking about. At the same time, TDS back then, tax deduction, so it used to be pieces of paper. Your Form 16 and Form 16A. So I have done a couple of, back then even dividends used to be taxed and used to have a TDS, which is now again the case in the current scenario. So with the dividend slip, you used to get these small pieces of paper, which was no bigger than a railway ticket. Okay, and that could be worth crores based on what is the value of the tax deducted on that particular slip. Now think of that transformation. Now what we have, the whole TDS system works on a 26AS sort of a system where you know exactly what the TDS is, and that is the portal that tells you this. So you're no longer depending on pieces of paper anymore. I think we are at that stage in transaction taxation in India in terms of the way GST is progressing. We are no more dependent on paper invoices. Okay. Yes, there are issues with claiming input credits right now. We are part of that ecosystem where we're facing these challenges. But 5 years from now, where we are in a much healthier way of dealing with this, much better way where more people are able to understand how this works, I think it will be much smoother. I think input credits will get a lot more easier to deal with. And as Rohit and Sachin said, we are looking at reconciliation getting much smoother. The differences that exist today between organizations A and B, I think they are much easier to deal with. And lastly, I would say is integration. That's something that we're doing on the supply chain that the government is doing on the highways part of it, with the whole FASTag, e-pass system. So in a way, you're not just going to have a tracking, obviously supply chain GPS managed trucks and you can find out. But I think we're going to see a lot more compliances and a lot fewer avenues for tax evasion, which can help us all, both as businesses, the taxes going down, as well as individuals where we probably don't have to pay such exorbitant taxes. So
great point. Rohit, you would say embrace the change. Don't wait.
Yeah, so I think Amit kind of mentioned what I was going to say, right? Again at a step back level, right? If you look at where the Indian consumer market was, right, in
10 years ago,
2013, even I would say even 6-7 years ago, right? See, we were laggards in terms of how many, let's say, smartphones were there and so on and so forth, right? So see, the good part about India is that on many of the things, we lag by long enough, right? That things become very cheap, right? and once things become cheap, they get adopted actually ferociously, right? So I think what happened in the Indian consumer market between 13-14 to 19-20, right? In 5-6 years, we have become, almost at the same level. And I would say because of some of the government interventions and, geo kind of interventions, we are probably leapfrogged a little bit ahead. Right now, if you go to the US, right, actually their systems, their payment systems feel very antiquated, very, very antiquated, right? So I think in my mind, from like 2020 to 2025 is going to be that era for Indian businesses, right? We are going to leapfrog, right? And we see a lot of these things, we see a lot of these directions where the winds are blowing. And I think it is going to, just like in the consumer world, right? You had young kids who were adopting things fast, and then, grandfathers adopting things in like 2016-17. We'll have the same thing happening in the businesses, right? Who wants to be kind of mentally like a young kid and who wants to be mentally like a grandkid? That difference will be there. But no matter what, right? 5 years later, paper will be out, right? If you're trying to do things on paper, if you're trying to evade taxes, it will be too painful, right? And your counterparts, are going to shrink every day.
Yeah.
The people who are happy to do things in cash, people who are happy to do things, with paper as a primary currency, that's going to disappear. And the other thing I would just like to say is, what we are building right now, right, are the basic rails, right, on which, we are one of the apps. There will be 10 other apps that will come up, right? And for consumer, right, for the consumer, which is the businesses in this case, right, I think it will unleash a series of, I would say, entrepreneurs who say now everything, like I have a business app for everything, right? Therefore, my life is much simpler, right? And the other thing that, in my opinion, also will happen, you brought up like the case of like, let's say, LIC agents and so on and so forth. What we see, we serve 60,000 CAs in India, right?
Yeah.
They are using our platform as well, right? So actually, everybody is going to get on the same platform, and lives will actually be very, very simple. And last thing I would want to mention is, very vigorously agree with Amit on the fact that, eventually evasion is going to be, there's a lot of people who in India do things by the book. There are a lot of people who don't do things by the book, right? And there was always like the people who are doing things by the book, they always feel like, why do I have to do this, right? At somewhere in their heart, they feel. So now I think the playing field is being leveled. And because of that, because of the tax revenues that the governments will get, it will actually impact all of us in a positive way. So when you take a 20-year view, I think it's a huge positive. And yes, we can fault the, as Amit also said, our internal systems themselves, right? You try implementing a new ERP in your company, you will have much more. I can honestly tell you, implementing GST, in the country, or implementing e-invoicing in the country has been simpler than implementing ERP in a company, right? So I think, while it's good to beat up the government or whatever, that's a national pastime, but, I think we should appreciate what they have actually been able to do.
Absolutely, guys.
That is absolutely true. I mean, implementing internal systems are far more challenging than, for system network.
Great. Guys, to sum up, right, these gentlemen here spoke about, being accountable, right? It makes you accountable, but what we also expect is an accountable government. As you guys go digital, your entrepreneurship abilities, you'll see new age entrepreneurs scale up also. So what do we expect? Rule of law, accountability, and transparency. That's where India is heading. And I think GST and e-invoicing is on that roadmap. With that, guys, we come to the end of this session about e-invoicing. I thank our panelists for sharing their insights. And I'm sure those in the audience will have a fair share of questions. They would have had a fair share of takeaways. Thank you for attending. If you have any doubts, questions, write into us. We'll write into these gentlemen and get it answered again. Thank you so much. Thank you. Have a good one. Bye.